Hey everyone, it's Raghu, and I'm back with Mindrolling, and I have a wonderful new guest, Jill Satterfield. Jill, so great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, I'll just outright say one of the things that really interested me that I thought would be very useful for the audience is your bringing together meditation and somatic exercises.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that we have all, in one way or another, we tend to spend more time trying to detach ourselves or attach ourselves
True.
to the body and to the physical.
Yeah.
So, there's some wonderful guidance that you have.
Thank you.
But after getting to know you a little bit through, the wonders of getting online, one of the huge thing for you, and I know it happened, this is, tremendous encounter with physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened around 20, I think, when you were around 20, early 20s or something?
Yeah, 19, and it continues.
Oh, really?
On and off, yeah.
God, we are all given such incredible trials.
I know.
Through our karma and so on.
That was my main one. It has been my main one, yeah.
Yeah. But before that, because I know when this started to happen, you had no particular interest certainly in Eastern spirituality or any of that. So in your teen years, you never really connected to, as I call it when I speak to people that I don't know and then we're just meeting. What is it that turned you on to realize, gee, you could be happy? There is a way to be happy.
You in spite of the pain?
No, in spite of nothing. In spite of just being in a human body in this culture. I mean, because this is my experience. I mean, I was just, really unhappy, depressed teenager. And I just, went out of my way to rebel against the norms that were going on. Thank God for Bob Dylan, and because he expressed, okay, I'm not the only one, who thinks this is all a joke. But and then that led in my era, late 60s, early 70s, psychedelics.
Right.
And that opened the door.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say, what happened in your teenagehood years or whenever that a door was opened outside of the senses that we are normally associated with, and the story that we so believe in, that we've told ourselves about who we are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in high school, mainly, I had this really fantastic art teacher, and I considered myself an artist. And I would do whatever work I was doing. And a lot of times I would draw or, use ink pens and draw things from nature, like a lot of us do. I remember one time, though, drawing a single strawberry. And I had this sort of out-of-body experience. Like, I had never seen a strawberry like that before. And I sort of became, it sounds a little corny, but I became one with the strawberry. And then I remember I looked at my hand, and I was like, I drew that. I did that, and I was like sort of amazed at what had happened, on the paper, but I didn't take any credit for it. I drew that, but it was just not something that I was in control of. And that, I don't think I've ever mentioned this to anybody, but that was the first time that I just got completely absorbed into something. And
Really?
So I continued to do that. And then I went to school. I had wonderful parents, really great parents, but I went to school as far away from them as I could get to have another experience. And they wouldn't let me go to California because they said I'm already a little bit on the edge. But they did let me go to
California on the edge.
Arizona, because my father had been based at Air Force Base there. And so there's the University of Arizona, which is huge. And it was quite different. And I loved it, but I didn't take the classes also seriously. The art department wasn't very good. And that's what I wanted to study, art and philosophy and psychology. But I did run into peyote.
Oh, you did?
And we would take the fresh, mushy peyote and put it in a chocolate milkshake, which was disgusting. And we'd have a girlfriend of mine, and we'd have a friend drive us out to the Sonora Desert and arrange for him to pick us up. I don't know how we remembered which cactus was what, but we always found the place to be picked up a little bit before sunset or just as sunset was happening. And we would bring our sketchbooks and notebooks and spend the day there. And I had never read Carlos Castaneda at that point. I didn't know about psychedelics. I did sort of, but I had never tried them before. And it was so magical. And I was just blown away. So I did that, a bunch of times. And then I tried mushrooms and things, but, then I just felt that was my other really amazing spiritual connection. And it was through the peyote, which I knew was sacred, even though I hadn't been told that. But it just opened my mind, blew my mind, which is what we hope to do, I think. And I loved it. And then when I started meditation, I was having the same experiences, which was pretty wild, just being straight. So... yeah, it was the strawberry and the peyote. That did it for me. Yeah.
And we all have a strawberry at least. Right. We all have a strawberry. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think everything that you are representing now in terms of teaching is such, the path really started for you with this intolerable pain. So I think you need to tell that story so people get an idea of.
Yeah. Well, when I was in art school, I finally transferred out of Arizona. I went to New York, even though I'd gotten in some California schools. My parents were fine with New York. My dad worked in New York. So I transferred to Parsons, and I was in the fine arts department. And, completely, had always been relatively healthy, very active physically, just doing whatever we do. And I had this sudden experience of pain in my belly, or in my pelvis, actually. And I had never had pain before, so it was completely new. I think I was 18. Yeah, I was 18. And so I started going to some different doctors. I told my parents about it, and they said, well, go get checked out. So I ended up seeing a lot of doctors, Upper Park Avenue and Columbia Hospital, and, the people that were experts, and no one believed me.
Really?
It was like, oh, well, you're an artist and you're imagining this, or just don't drink dairy, or, don't have milk in your coffee, or, a variety of sort of inane things like that. And then, I would try all of those things wholeheartedly to try to help myself, but nothing was helping. So I had some, exploratory surgeries. They thought they found some. It was sort of a mixed review where there was nothing substantial that would cause that much pain. So I was going from doctor to doctor, and all I was hearing, and it's still unfortunately very common, is it's all in your mind. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I didn't know what to do about my mind. So, that it was part of I thought, first of all, I thought this was organic, I was not making this up. I was happy. I was so happy. Being in New York City and being in an art school was just a dream of mine. And it was probably the best years of my life. So I kept, trying to find people that would believe me and help me, and gave them kind of all the power at that point. And after years of that, I convinced it's actually, I had a major surgery. They didn't really find anything substantial, something, but not enough to cause all that pain. And years later, I finally found a surgeon and I said, I know this is organic. Can you open me up? And this is after having lots of surgery. So you know how desperate that must be.
Yeah.
And so he said, sure. And he opened me up and he found an organic reason for the pain. And it was an intestinal thing. And quote unquote fixed it as best he could. And I was, pretty good for a while. Pretty good. But I still had pain. I had a lot of, whenever you have a surgery, it's an invasion of your body and it creates scar tissue and adhesions and also trauma. Medical trauma is very real. Even though it's like, oh, this is a small surgery. Oh, it'll take you, so many days to recover. It never does. But it's in your body. And so I had a hard time with that because my body's really sensitive. So then I started going to yoga classes before they were really, that well established or known. And this was in the late 70s, early 80s. And I didn't find that helpful, although I liked it. And then I continued to go to yoga and I got very enthusiastic and practiced it a lot.
Yeah.
But I had a pretty dogmatic teacher that said, oh, this will cure this. And you must not be doing it enough. And I was practicing 2 hours a day. I mean, I really liked it.
Really?
And it wasn't helping my physical body. It was helping my mind, of course, somewhat because, it's soothing after a while. And I did start connecting with my body, but not in a conscious way like meditation did. So eventually I started going on retreats. I have to help myself. This is ridiculous. And I had read about some ancient yogis from India and ancient yogis from Tibet who had done all sorts of wonderful things that we would think was, yeah, right, sure. And I was inspired. I thought, well, if they can do it, why can't I try? And so the first many, many years of retreat in pain, I spent in the body trying to connect with it, in my body trying to connect with it. And it was a whole adventure. It's been that adventure, ever since, like 30 years. Mm. Yeah. So I learned a lot because I felt like I had to in order to help myself. And there was a lot of healing. Like I did some pretty intense healing, but, not enough to make it go away forever.
Mm. I think it's interesting to tell folks listening or watching just where there was something that happened that really urged you forward more and more into practice, spiritual practice.
Right.
And the way in which you were able to use the pain as rather than the breath, for instance, to be able to actually go in to that feeling and what happened from there.
Yeah, I did utilize the breath, but it wasn't in ways that I was being taught at that time. It was more Burmese style insight meditation retreats. I did a Goenka retreat, which was very helpful in terms of really microscopically getting into my body and staying with sensation. That was brilliant. I would never do one again, but at the time I found it incredibly helpful. Because I like the psychological, the phenomenological aspects of the body. So I don't want to just stop at sensation. I want to put it together with cognition and history and, lots of different conscious explorations. Because like the Buddha taught that the body is the material form of consciousness. The mind is the mental form, but he never separated them. And we do, as you know. So, at least, in Western culture mostly. So, it was a matter of, and I'm an artist, so I have I have a decent imagination. So I would pretend like I could see down in my body. You remember Jacques Cousteau?
Yeah.
I loved him as a kid. It was like down, down. And you would see all these magical creatures under the sea that we never had seen before. And I pictured myself like having this telescope, and I'd go down, down, all the way down to my pelvis. And I'd not pretend, but I imagined that I could look around. And it was quite dark. So what I did at first was just try to get my breath down there. It was completely blocked from my navel down, which is what happens with any kind of trauma or pain. You can't really visualize it. You're not in that part of your body. You're in that part of your house, so to speak. You're not consciously occupying it. And there's reasons why we don't. I mean, there's a variety of reasons. My reason was the pain and all the surgeries. So I just sort of organically thought, well, if I can connect my breath, probably from all the yoga I'd done, then I can start to heal it. And so I spent years doing that, and I finally could see it. And I kept imagining that my pelvis was like this large glass bowl that had flower petals at the bottom of it. And in deeper states of meditation, I would try to swirl the flowers around as if my breath was a wind, as if my breath was a breeze. And I couldn't do it for a long time, but I didn't give up. I just kept trying. And then one time I was like, oh, I can see it. And I saw purple and pink and yellow flowers. Now, this might be unusual for a lot of people, but then I knew I was going to heal.
You might say that.
So I have this kind of sixth sense. I don't know where it came from, but I eventually healed it. I eventually healed peristalsis. I've lost it again. It's come back, but that was something that I was told you can't change peristalsis. Once it's gone, it's gone. It's part of the very deep autonomic nervous system. But I did. So it was a, imaginative exploration, even though I didn't, I thought, I'm just making these things up, and I was to a degree, because there were no instructions like that. It's always like, breathe your, stay your nostrils, or go to your belly, or go to your, just your chest. It was pretty dry instruction for good reasons, probably, but it didn't help me.
It's also imagination. Once you speak to imagination, then you get people checking out pretty quickly, because it's not real,
Right. And yeah.
So Ram Dass, who had a great little quip that he used to use about that. He said, people think I'm crazy because I talk to my dead guru.
Right.
I have a room, he said, and it's my imagination room.
Yeah.
And he went on from there.
Yeah.
But that's again something else, that the way that you use it to actually move through something really traumatic.
Yeah. Well, it sort of made me believe in just tapping into collective unconscious, or wisdom in the collective. I've felt like I was making it up, but I think really maybe I've done this before. I don't know.
Yeah. Not to mention your tremendous courage and persistence not to give up.
I'm dogged.
Yeah, got that.
Yeah. Well, it didn't seem courageous to me. It felt like a last resort. And then it just blossomed into this incredible understanding of the mind and body for me. Maybe not the same as others, but for me, it was just, it was enlightening. I'm not enlightened, but it was an enlightening experience every time I would do retreats, and I did a lot of them, hundreds. I think also calming my nervous system had a lot to do, whether I knew that or not, but I didn't know that at the time. But when I was practicing, my nervous system was just so calm and relaxed, and my mind, as can happen, opened, and my heart opened, and my body relaxed, and that facilitates healing. Maybe not a cure, but it definitely allows the body to have the best circumstances. To change. And the other interesting thing is that I didn't know this at the time, but you probably do, that imagination creates a physiological response. What you imagine changes your body. It changes your mind. Like if you're thinking about your guru or your teacher, or someone that you love, or you're picturing a bowl with flowers in it, it changes your body.
It's as real as
It's
any
so
other
crazy.
level or plane, rather, of consciousness. Right?
Yeah, that we don't appreciate.
Yeah,
very much.
Yeah. Well, we're not brought up here in the West, or
that's right,
to appreciate it.
Right. So we're strange.
yeah, we are. I mean, we went to India, and we would living with families, literally completely embodying that culture. And Hanuman, the monkey god, where we were in the north, in the foothills of the Himalaya, that was a big thing. They grew up with Hanuman. And Krishna particularly has a good joke about it. Look, these people grew up with Hanuman. We grew up with Mickey Mouse. So what do you expect?
I never heard him say that. That's great. Yeah. What do you expect? That's right.
So, yeah.
That's right.
But, you talk about, I read the thing you wrote, A Twisted Story. That was pretty great, Jill.
Thank you.
And the first sentence is, a spiritual search usually begins with the recognition of some sort of suffering, physical, emotional, or mental. There's a way in which, I don't know anybody. Well, that's not true. I guess I have met some people who have not, had perfect parents, perfect purpose, ambition, whatever, when they were young. And it was just all glorious. And then but they are few and far between. And
I know.
I just hark back. I was miserable. And that miserableness, that misery led me to search.
Yeah.
And you, you took on something a lot more, shall we say, traumatic. We all say that. I had a father that was, God, I keep talking about you, Dad, and these podcasts. You're a nice subject for me now.
Right.
But he was, came out of the war, PTSD, and he was a tyrant and screamer, the whole thing. And it took everybody who's listening to this podcast, Jill, will know you've told that story a billion times. But for what we're speaking to right here, Neem Karoli Baba had me one day. He said, "Did you give your father the medicine?" I said, "Yeah, he had a cold." I gave him some aspirin. He said, "Nay, the yogi medicine that Ramdas gave me." I went, "What? Acid?" And my father went, "LSD." He was like 50 odd years old at the time.
Wow.
We were in our early 20s.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he said, "Take care of your father while he's in India and then meet me somewhere else." And sure enough, I found somebody with a hit, and he took it.
You're kidding.
And he had a death because he was so lost that he thought he wasn't afraid to die. He was so disconnected from that experience. And then he got reconnected and so the rest of our history was wonderful. We still reverted back into toe-to-toe screaming at each other, but not as often and not as committed, shall we say, attached to it. Yeah. So, all's to say that it is absolutely a given that pain prompts you to look inside one way or the other, right?
Yeah, it can. Or it can prompt you to leave, as many people do. And I don't think it's, I think it's just because we don't know the options, a lot of us. I was always a rebel in terms of religion and spirituality. And when I was 5, had grandparents in Ohio, and fantastic grandparents, but they would take me to a Sunday school, Methodist Sunday school, and we would sing hymns. And I don't know where this came from again, but I would sing, I don't know Jesus, we've never met, and I was scolded all the time, but I was like, why should I sing something that I don't believe?
Oh, really? At that age?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And so, I remember it, but also, other people have told me about it. And then in high school, started experimenting with some drugs. I was taking speed one day, and my mother overheard me with some guys that were in my room. We're talking about, whoa, it hasn't hit yet. And she was so beyond, she didn't know how to help me. I thought I was fine. But lo and behold, the guys were made to leave, and I'm sitting in my room, and it starts to hit.
Oh.
And knock, knock, knock. It was the minister of our church.
No.
Yeah. This tall man, Episcopal minister named Mr. Pickering. And he comes in and I was like, wow. He comes in and he's towering over me. And he said, do you know how much pain you're causing your parents? I said, yeah, actually I did. I said, yeah. He said, God will never forgive you for this.
Oh, great.
And I, such a, whatever I was, I looked up at him and I said, then you and I don't believe in the same God, because the God that I know doesn't think this is a big deal. And he ostracized my family from the church.
The whole family? What did your parents do? They didn't do nothing.
They didn't do anything. And it was so sad because my brother was about to have another heart surgery.
Oh.
And he had been ill, younger too. And my mom asked him to pray for him, and he didn't. I was mean, it was really mean. So all of those things, and having a grandfather that was very religious, who was nasty, it just wasn't for me. So it's funny what the suitcase is that we are born with, that we come in with, Sometimes it's unknowable why we are as we are when we're really little, and not trying to, make a big deal out of anything, but just don't connect.
Yeah. Sometimes they're not suitcases, they're large trunks.
That's true. It reminds me of that story when Ram Dass was trying to move, and he had that van, I think it was. And he'd start throwing things away. He only wanted to bring a small amount, or he had a car first. It started with a car, and he'd throw things away in the dumpster. And then in the middle of the night, he'd go down in the dumpster and he said, no, I don't want to give this up. Have you heard that story? He told us that in the Bahamas.
I don't know.
And anyway, so he would go down and he'd pick through the dumpster and, no, I can't give this up. And eventually he had like a big van, rather than a car. And so he was traveling around trying to be free with all this crap in his van or truck or whatever it was. And it was funny how he told it, but that's it's hard to let go.
Yeah.
So Robert Bly talked about carrying around a big bag that was like nuclear waste. Which I love that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
You put a quote in here from Marcel Proust.
Okay.
I mean, I've never seen this, but the true voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes.
Yeah.
I just think that's so terrific, Jill.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually, we're getting into the, being able to present Ram Dass's purview through the foundation that we have, Love, Serve, Remember, around psychedelics. There's a lot of work going on now, funding and research around, of course, the efficacy of it for many different avenues of therapy.
Right. It's so important.
Yeah. So important. But there's a whole other group out there that are just regular people. Gee, maybe that'll help me kind of find out a little more about who I really am.
Right.
They don't put it in those words. So we want to represent, Ram Dass and Leary in the earliest days, of course, setting and all that.
Right.
But in his later days, it was really an emphasis was around the integration process and
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
it can give you to open a door. But
Right.
then how do you walk through it?
How do you, yes,
And how's
bring it
your
skillfully into
day-to-day?
your life? That's
Yeah.
right. Keep it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, your combining of Buddhist practice, Buddhist meditation and yoga
Mhm.
is unique. And I think, just talk a little bit about how you came to bring those two practices together.
Well, I think it was out of starting to go on the silent retreats that, a lot of times when the pain was bad, instead of doing a walking meditation, I would go to my room and I'd do a restorative posture.
Hmm.
And I'd hang out in it for, 20, 45 minutes. And I would meditate in the body. That's what I thought I was
In that
doing.
one posture.
One pose, yeah. Sometimes when the bell rang, it was hard to get up. My body had been in this particular shape for a long time. And so I started to sense the body as a shape and take that, what's more recently called sustained attention. And I would sustain attention in the areas of the body that the posture was opening or facilitating opening. And I would just sort of witness. Sometimes I'd fool around, like with my imagination and moving what I thought of as a breeze, which was breath around, which was sort of the key to bringing consciousness around my body, was to breathe in it in different ways, not just in one place, but explore with the breath. And so it wasn't so much about the pose, but it was what it opened me to do, or what areas of the body it would open for me to explore. A better way to say it. And then when I started going back to the original teacher I had, she talked a lot when she was teaching us yoga, a lot of philosophy. She was a Taoist, and the postures were pretty quickly tied together. It was not like Ashtanga, but it was close. And I just wanted to linger, and I wanted to linger in silence. I didn't want somebody telling me what to think and feel and where this came from, because that was overriding my experience. So I less and less went to her classes and more started doing my own practice. And she's the one that kind of forced me to teach, actually, which was a good thing, because I wasn't interested in teaching yoga, but I earned a lot of money when I did. So she said, you can't practice with me anymore unless you start teaching. So that's how that happened. I was, just an artist and happy being that way. But so I was exploring the forms and shapes of the body, but taking my time so that, when you slow the mind down, you can see what's happening. If we go too fast, we can't see process, how things are shifting and changing. And, it really is just impermanence, right? We are not aware of that. We go too fast for that. And so that was one really important thing that I discovered, was slow down, stay in something, and move energy, which again, I thought I was making up. But, and then I started, experimenting with some of the more difficult poses, and, that took some muscle, to hold them, and to see if I could pay that much attention in them, let go of the effort, the muscular effort, to try to line up bones and take my awareness anywhere I wanted. And I had a lot of experiences of energy moving that way. And then I proposed to my teacher, my primary teacher, he's still my teacher, Ajahn Amaro, that maybe I could teach some stretches or some restoratives and even have a posture clinic in one of his retreats. And he's like, yeah, let's do that. So we were the first people to ever teach movement.
Is he American?
No, he's British, but he was the co-abbot at Abhayagiri, which is in Northern California, with Ajahn Pasano for many years. Now he's back in England at Amaravati. So we did this. He said, yeah, offer some classes, what you think is valuable. And that's how that started. And we were the first people to do it at IMS, Insight Meditation Society, and Spirit Rock. And I got so much side eye that if I had been trying to do that on my own, people would have just completely dismissed me. He gave me a leg up because he was totally into it. He didn't come to the classes, but he was supporting me. He asked me to do it.
Mm.
So that was about 28, 29, 30 years ago. So I learned by teaching people on retreat, I had to get really quiet and try not to disturb their silence. But I was called the entertainment for many years.
What? You were the entertainment?
It wasn't so nice, but...
What do you mean? What were they saying?
What? The entertainment?
Yeah.
Well, because on these, 10-day insight retreats, especially when they first started, it was more Burmese style. You didn't move. You definitely didn't lie down. Mm-hmm. And bringing in, a person who taught twice a day on the retreat was taking them away from the concentration. But I really was trying not to disturb the concentration, but bring the concentration into the body.
Mm. That's the key,
as skillfully as I could.
Yeah. I wish you had been there when I did take the course with Goenka all those years ago. I would have loved to have that break a couple of times.
Well, I don't think he would have allowed that.
No, he would not.
Right?
No.
That's why I went to IMS. I was like, oh, there's another place to do this.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Sharon and Joseph and Jack, they really became much more teachers that could accommodate in a way that, some of the teachers from the East really could not.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's continued to evolve to the fact that, to the point that people can lie down during retreat now, that we take people with lots of access needs, disabilities, illnesses.
Yeah,
that was not happening for a really long time. And so the fact that I taught meditation lying down was a big no-no. But the Buddha taught 4 postures that you can meditate in there's more, but sitting, walking, lying down, and standing. So that's what I thought I was doing. But oh my God, I got so much flack. Now it's taught in all the retreats.
Oh, well.
I'm, kind of proud to say I kickstarted that. But in the whole world, it's not a very big deal. In the insight world, the meditation world, it was a big deal because I did do it with some Tibetan teachers that I had too.
Oh, and, yes. Yes.
Yeah. So it was combining Dharma and the way of looking and holding things, because I never really learned the yogic philosophy that much. And I certainly didn't remember the Taoist. So because I was so in love with Dharma, I just tried to weave it right in so that the shape of the body didn't really matter, and yeah, that's how that started. And then I taught with a couple of Tibetan teachers as well. And that's who I really got the confidence to talk about energy moving from. Mm. Yeah.
You do, there's one quote from Iyengar. Where does the body end and the mind begin?
Right.
They cannot be divided as they are interrelated and but different aspects of the same all-pervading divine consciousness.
That's exactly right.
That's basically why I said, gee, I think Jill can really speak to something that'll be helpful for people, because to realize that is really, we just talked about Ram Dass, I was explaining Ram Dass's purview, in this case about psychedelics.
Right.
But really what he offered from the very beginning is, okay, here's a different place that you can, a different perch that you can view life, your life, other lives, what life itself is. And so that's why I think, this is really, really important,
Yeah, and he did it with such kindness and humor, He wasn't all dry and do it this way, which some teachers tend to do. That's not my style, obviously, but I really appreciated how he taught about love and interdependence and how how important it is to be compassionate. And, compassionate has a verb, which is action. And I mean, he was a embodiment of that and spread, in a lot of different places. And so he was an early inspiration for me. The Be Here Now book, when I'm a little younger than you are maybe, but, I remember reading that in college.
Way younger than I am.
Whoa.
I'm kidding.
So, I gathered inspiration from lots of different places. And I also have, sort of a neurodiverse mind, which I'm going to mention because I don't really think linearly so well. And I have a little dyslexia and something called dyscalculia. And it means that I turn things inside out and upside down. I don't remember spelling that much. I can't remember lists. I flunked math my entire school history. And, that was all my fault because I wasn't applying myself. I was trying, but my brain didn't work that way. So that's been helpful, is to not make these concrete assumptions about things, but just see how they come to me. And that's what's inspired my teaching, forever. So we tend to overlay our direct experiences with what someone has told us. And that's hard to get rid of.
Exactly.
So there were different inspirations throughout my younger adult life and continue now that are from all sorts of spiritual practices. Because essentially I find a similar thread. And I don't know any spiritual practice, well, at least the ones I know of, that I've, been interested in that separate the body and mind. And so I just thought, well, this is what I'm really interested in. Let me see what I can do to bring it to more people's awareness.
Another word that applies here for you is curiosity.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's something everybody should consider. You become a little bit more curious, and then you can look at the different perspectives that are possible, that it's not just the one of believing your thoughts and your story as being a major one, or there's a body and then there's a mind and there's spirituality. Right. There's only one thing going on, which is Neem Karoli Baba, as soon as we sat down. Sabek. It's all one. All one. That was the first thing he said to us.
How fortunate it was for you to be with him.
Well, that's a wild understatement.
Right. Yeah.
But, one thing, we are, and you mentioned this, we are deeply programmed to move away from discomfort. This is a huge thing. Yeah. So this is, to me, a tremendous accomplishment's not the right word, but it's us in the West. Everything's going to be an accomplishment or not. But the way that you were able to tangle with this pain, right, for so long, or
unentangle it,
and then untangle it,
right,
is really working with discomfort in a way that most people find very difficult. What is? I mean, obviously, the pain is an inspiration to transform.
Right.
But there's something else. There's a development to me of courage. Can you talk about that in your own experience?
Yeah. Well, I do feel like a courageous person because I sort of have been on my own in a way, since I was a child. And because I wasn't finding a lot of people that were interested in the same things I was. And I was a little bit bullied when I was a kid. And I just sort of thought, well, I got to seek my own path. And I didn't know, in high school, it was rebellion with no cause. I just needed to rebel. Came from a, East Coast family, where we didn't have to want for things too much. And we all worked and things like that. So we knew the value of that. But anyway, at a certain point, I thought when I was young, in art school, I thought, well, I'm not suffering enough to be an artist, because that had not occurred yet.
Yeah, right.
It's like, I remember saying that. We were on the way to the Barnes Foundation in Pennsylvania. So, or saying it to myself. And so I've always been naturally curious. I think my parents I think I got it from them. And also I didn't believe that I've never believed that there was limits to what we could do if we tried. Especially with imagination. I mean, where is imagination? How do you find, what is imagination? That's just curious right there. I mean, curious forming, like, how do these things come out? They just do. And so, I just thought, I'm going to apply some of the things that I had read about the ancient yogis and, the really outstanding things that they were said to have done. And I'm going to, well, why don't I just try? So it was that sort of why not rather than why that's always led my life. And also, I don't always believe what other people say.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful today in our world.
Yeah.
It is.
Find your own, your own center, your own refuge. And then you hear from a different place. It's not being tossed around by believing everything you hear internally or externally. So I just always had that sort of spirit. And so the pain, rather than being something to push away, which it was for many years, I didn't really get it, was more like, okay, well, this is a body. What can I do with it? Let me try to change it or rearrange it around. And, I did. But I think it is kind of courageous, but I think also as an artist and being brought up to take care of myself, basically emotionally, mentally take care of myself. I was always physically very well taken care of. That was, natural for me. I'm great being by myself. I love, long silent retreats. That's not normal, but I also love people. So, I have that kind of mix.
Yeah.
So, it was like, well, why don't I just try? Why don't I just try? This is a phenomenon. I was gathering that from the teachings, the Buddhist teachings. This is a phenomenon that I get to look at and see if I can figure this out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I realized the first recognition I had was that I have to connect to my body and I have to try to be kind to myself, not compassionate. That was too much of a leap. I thought, well, let me just try with some kindness here so I can connect the mind and the body. And then let me go right in. I took that little telescope right into the area of pain. And what I was, when I would be in deeper states of practice, what I could discover was that the pain, felt like this big, honestly. It was just that big. There was a nadir to it. If you really investigate it, which I think I got from a Goenka, if you really investigate it, you notice that pain is an umbrella for pleasant, unpleasant, interesting feelings. It's not just unpleasant. We deem it unpleasant and everything contracts around it so it doesn't feel good. But there's tickling and tingling and coolness and vibration in there. I was like, wow, it took the realm of pain or the area of pain down to about this big, which was really interesting. It was like opening the curtains and discovering Oz, this tiny little man with a microphone. Why should he control me? Right? So it reduced the pain down to manageable size. It wasn't overwhelming me. And then I started to notice the emotions that were coming and going with it and the thoughts and the proliferation of thoughts and where they would take me, all associated with the pain. And so I could separate this, again, all through the Dharma teachings. And it just didn't have the power. I didn't need to identify as someone with pain anymore. And that was the empowerment.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was but who knows why we fall into different paths or I don't know.
I mean, it's tremendous complexity in being a human. But you know what you say, just continuing on what you were saying, that's my podcast partner behind me, by the way. Even though freedom from intense pain might happen for only moments at a time, if I looked pain directly in the face, it lost its power to overwhelm me, and my body could relax around it, which is what you were just speaking to.
Yeah.
I felt larger than the pain, like a person gaining her first full personality back, not to be labeled, and only relate to myself as a person in pain. When one becomes overly identified with something like pain or illness, it can narrow and constrict life. It was as if I'd opened an aperture and allowed my view to widen. I returned to being more than just a person in pain.
Yeah.
It's kind of concisely says it all, no?
Yeah. It opened my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I refused to be labeled by it internally anymore. I didn't care what anybody else thought.
Yeah. Now, one thing that you were alluding to, that you had met some Tibetan teachers and so on.
Right.
That's as much part of this whole thing. They don't just happen by accident. You meet what is necessary for you to meet to move through this life. But you met the family, the Tibetan family of teachers, right? From so everybody, I've mentioned him before. Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche was one of the greatest meditation masters of the last couple of centuries, basically.
Yeah.
And he had 4 sons, one of who just passed, and each one of the other 3 is very active teaching around the world. And one is your teacher, Mingyur Rinpoche.
Yeah.
Tsoknyi Rinpoche, and what's the other brother's name?
Chokyi Nyima.
Chokyi Nyima. And I only know Mingyur. Actually, I've never met him in person, but I've done a couple of podcasts with him that were just really delightful. And just we don't have much time left, but just tell me, you met him. What was your impression? What happened, and what has continued in terms of your path with him in particular?
I met him because he started doing these small retreats in Connecticut at a church. And a couple of my friends had done the very first retreat he did in the United States, and they said, "Oh, you have to come to this next year." And so I did, and it was who's who of the Buddhist teacher world. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
And they were still rather small retreats, And he saw me and he said, "Oh, yoga." And I don't remember how he knew. I think he knew of me through Ajahn Amaro. Because Ajahn Amaro had gone to one of his retreats. Yeah. Anyway, I think that was the connector. But so he asked me if I would teach him yoga. I was like, here, the white girl teach you, the Lama, yoga? But he didn't know any physical practices then. That's not, he wanted to learn. So I said, okay. So on retreats, I would teach him about an hour of yoga, and he would say, "Do you have any questions for me? You want to talk to me about practice?" I said, "No, this is your time." Part of that was because I didn't want to impose. And part of it was I honestly didn't have any questions yet because I didn't know enough. Have to admit. So, at one point, years later, and then I was on his board for a while, and he would stay with me in New York City when he would come.
Oh,
so sometimes for a few weeks. Nice.
Really?
He always had an attendant, and sometimes his wife would come. So that was pretty trippy. I have some interesting stories from that time. But when I was teaching him, I would say, and I was teaching people on his retreats. I would say, breathe into your kidneys and breathe over into the right side of your shoulder, or breathe around your skull, or something like this. I would use all the metaphors that I always did. And he started to say, go to Jill for subtle energy, and go to Jill because she understands the subtle body. And that I think helped some people, but some people got a little angry that he was mentioning me too much. But at any rate, he would make fun of me. He'd say, Jill says, breathe into the kidneys, and I'd be like, Anyway, at one point he said, how did you come to this? How did you come to understanding energy, and how did you heal your body? And I finally told him, I think this is after I'd known him a couple of years. And he encouraged me to tell people. He encouraged me to tell people, and that's why I wrote that chapter. Because he said, people will look at you and they have no idea what you've gone through. You need to tell people. So I slowly did. I didn't want to be that vulnerable. I didn't want people to think about, the girl with the intestinal problems. I've since had heart surgery, so you could think of me as that too. But
Jesus, too.
At any rate, he said, okay, show me how you do this. And so I put myself in a pose, and this is going to sound funny to some people, whatever, but I moved energy through my body. He could see it. It was wild. I'd never had anybody ask me about this. And he said, well, describe the feelings of it. And I did. And it was, if you know anything about, well, I'm not going to say this on a podcast, but, it's kind of private feelings that you wouldn't tell anybody too much unless they, had a background in practice. So he said, yeah, I understand what you're doing. He goes, watch this. So he pulls up his sleeve. And as he points to his skin, the hair rises up. And then, there it goes. I'm doing a little bit. I can make the hair rise up, but I can't let it relax. But he was like doing this. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, you understand. So we had a really interesting meeting of the mind there. And he encouraged me to teach those subtle practices. But, a lot of people thought they were about sex, which they could be, but that's not the point. So at any rate, he really wanted me. He pushed me out there to
really,
teach about energy and the body like that. And so he was instrumental because he's one of the few lamas that actually does talk about the subtle body a lot. And so that was really great. And then I met his brother after that and helped him, set up his tour and, behind the scenes things. And he would stay with me for weeks at a time. That was trippy.
Well, you are really fortunate.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Of course, you said that to me. I should be saying it, but this is really.
I think it's the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't recognize it so much at the time, but later you do. You recognize it a little at the time. I mean, I was like, really? You want to spend this? Mingyur Rinpoche said, when we're together like this, just treat me like family. It was very casual.
Yeah, I get that from him, for sure. And by the way, everybody, you certainly should check out Mindrolling Rinpoche. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
In Love with the World, I believe was the book that he wrote about his going over the wall, so to speak.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's an intense
And he
book.
had tremendous anxiety as a youngster. But he also had the greatest meditation teacher in the universe.
Greatest Dzogchen teacher, of the century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, he's real.
He's
way.
amazing. Yeah, he's really amazing.
Yeah. So,
I have fallen away from them in some ways. Yeah. When teachers get more well-known, they have
more demand.
And people keep a tighter rein on them.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like,
Yeah, right. No, you had a completely other experience.
My thing.
Yeah. That's another reason why with Neem Karoli Baba, there was nothing.
Oh, so beautiful.
There was nothing. Of course, now, if you go, he left in 1973. If you go there now to where we hung out with him in a place called Kenchi, you can't even get, there's lines going. I mean, it's a spiritual tourist destination.
Wow.
I can't even go back there because of I can, but it's like, whoa, it's another universe.
Yeah. Well, there isn't that aspect with the Theravadins, the Thai Forest Monastery.
No.
And that's so I just felt, I'm going to stay
more comfy
here.
There. Yeah.
I embraced and embodied a lot of the Tibetan practices. Of course, it changed my practice very deeply. So,
speaking of practice, a couple of minutes meditation, would you?
Sure.
Just a little guided meditation for a few
like
before we leave?
3 minutes or something?
Yeah.
2-3 minutes, sure. Well, you can always make the choice of whether you're going to fully close your eyes or cast your gaze down. I would suggest do what's comfortable for you. Allow your body to be in a shape or a form that's relaxed without falling apart. And see if you can let your eyes sink in towards the back of your head as if they're falling into quilts, or as if they're turning to look at the back of your skull. That's how deeply relaxed the eyes become, or can. And if you're able, see if you can soften the skin on your face, your mouth, lips, and the tongue in your mouth. And sometimes we can sense even relaxing the gums. And then if you can follow your tongue down your throat, just allow it to soften and feel a little bit more plump. And these are initial ways that we can start to become a little bit more embodied. And we can also notice weight, the weight of the bones, the weight of gravity, and allow the body to connect with whatever it is that you're sitting on or lying on or standing on. And this connection brings us closer to the earth, the body of the earth. And then we might notice this tiny little breeze flowing around softly somewhere inside. See if you can find that. Might not be big. It might not be that noticeable. Just take one moment to touch into where it is and how it feels, like if it's on the right side or the left side, the front or the back of your body. We can notice the breath as the bridge or the connector between the body and mind, between the heart, mind, and body, if you will. And allow it to be delicate and soft and tender and be where it wants to be and how it wants to be. Just for a moment. And then when you're ready, allow your eyes to lift, whether they're fully closed or slightly open. And as you look out, see if you can look out as if you're receiving the sight or the sights around you. So the eyes are still resting in the back of the skull or looking towards the base of your skull, if you can do that. Or even looking at your heart internally, the heart center. And that all comes through your eyes. And as you look around and even look at the screen, do it as if you're not expecting anything and you're not rushing forward, but you're just noticing sight from internal awareness, really. And the more you can practice that, the more interesting it'll be to walk around. And notice when your body shifts forward and notice when your eyes pull forward and see if you can drop them back down and in so that you can notice where you're breathing, how you're looking, where your energetic body if it's in front of you or behind you even, or, past or future or diving forward. And it'll be hopefully an interesting experiment. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. But I do thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one other quote that I'm just looking at now.
Okay.
That you, from Tulku Thondup, who I do not know. I think I've heard of him. He said, the goal is to serve others. But how do we start? We have to start with ourselves.
Yeah.
If I'm going to serve you, I have to start with myself by improving my attitude and actions to make myself a good servant for you, to make myself a proper tool to serve you.
Yeah.
This could come right out of our legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so similar.
So right on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
but
we need it,
improving
now.
my attitude. Yeah. We all need to. Yeah. And this is a bit of enlightenment, just improving one's attitude.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And having enough curiosity to look at stuff as possibility.
And turn it upside down.
Yeah. Turn it upside down.
Francis Picabia, an artist, said, our heads are round so our thoughts can change directions. It's all perception and attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. That's terrific.
Yeah. Well,
thanks
thank
so
you.
much for being here.
Pleasure.
Where's the book, though? I think I've already asked you that. You got to put a book together.
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. Well, it's around, but it's not down on paper yet. Yeah. I don't have the time right now. I don't have the. Yeah, I'm an independent contractor, so
Right.
Yeah,
I'm busy.
I'd love to finish it. I would love to finish it. Maybe it's forthcoming. I don't know. I have to try to retire a little bit, which I can't do yet. Yeah.
Again,
thank you, though.
Jill. Thanks, and we will, of course, link you with Jill's website so you can be in touch with her to find out what she's doing, where she's doing it.
Yeah,
Jill does a lot around Spirit Rock.
Yeah.
Jack Cornfield's Vipassana place in Marin. And you still go to IMS with Sharon and Joseph?
Yeah, I was there in May when Ajanaro was teaching there. Yeah. I did a retreat for myself.
Yeah.
Because we taught together in July at Spirit Rock, so I needed to
come down,
get another retreat under my belt before I did that. Yeah.
So, yes, we will link it all up. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling. You'll see the show notes, which will have all of these wonderful ways to keep in touch. And everybody, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.